I don't wanna be the boy that runs in the back. I don't wanna be the kid that falls in the dark. All I really want to be is the guy that gets that girl.
Welcome to the AJ Steele Show. We discuss politics, sex, money, and everything in between. And now, here's your host, an immigrant, a self-made millionaire, an American, AJ Steele.
Everything I say and do, I'm just not good enough for you. I don't wanna be the boy that runs.
Welcome to the AJ Steele Show. So our last couple of weeks have been absolutely incredible. It all started when we covered the Trump rally in Nevada, and then our show made top 40 in England and in Australia, and we started charting in New Zealand and even in the Philippines. Can you believe it? We have listeners in the Philippines, and it's incredibly humbling and gratifying to know that we have listeners all over the world. So I want to say a special thank you to all our loyal listeners here in America and throughout the world. Wow. Now, continuing with the good news, a lot of the fires that I told you about in the last few shows all over the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and Northern California, and even Southern California, they're kind of slowing down, and the firefighters are getting them under control. So that's great news out here. And the smoke, I told you all about the smoke. It was everywhere. It was in the air. It was in our clothes, in our homes, and the cars. The smoke is mostly gone, so it almost feels like we may be turning the corner. Now, continuing with the exciting news that we have a great show today, and it features a senior writer for Breitbart News. He's a very intelligent man. His name is Allum Bokhari, and he's going to be talking about his book, Deleted: Big Tech's Battle to Erase the Trump Movement and Steal the Election. And trust me, you're going to love hearing from him. He has so much to say. He is bright. He is articulate. He has a sense of humor, and he has a great accent, and you're going to love his book. But before I go into this complete euphoric high here on the AJ Steele Show, I think we're going to have to put a break on the champagne and the balloons and get a dose of reality. Many of you have listened to me for a while now. You know that I can be very dark and pessimistic at times. And as a matter of fact, a childhood friend just told me recently that I was a cynic at the age of 5 in kindergarten. Seriously? That must have been so much fun for the rest of the kids. Not to mention the poor teacher, right? But anyway, what is going on in our country? We have Antifa and Black Lives Matter rioting. That's nothing new. And then we have a new Supreme Court justice hearings coming up, and that's a really new thing, and that's a really big deal. But probably the most important news we have is the fact that we have an election coming up in about a month. And we need to take stock of it, and we need to figure out where we stand. Everyone on the conservative side, they all feel that President Trump will be reelected. And everyone on the other side, they feel that he'll lose. And most of the polls and most of the pundits, not that I trust him much, they're all telling us that Biden will sail through and win. But we know they've been majorly wrong before. To me, it seems like the enthusiasm is on President Trump's side. And going to one of his rallies just proved that to me. But to be fair, that could be a false positive. Maybe these people are just a small minority who just love to hang out and watch the president speak. Who knows? Who really knows? Personally, I hope that the enthusiasm wins over the media lies and all this mail-in voting and this suppression from big tech. And all of that actually leads us to today's topic perfectly. Many years ago, in the old days, 10, 20 years ago, we used to learn everything about the elections from the newspapers and the radio and the TV. And all of those entities, just like now, they were always tilted to the left, but they weren't so blatant about it, and there were enough dissenting voices for the other side. Plus, in the old days, 10, 15 years ago, we used to talk to each other. We used to go out and talk to our neighbors. We used to hang out with people. We didn't just spend all our time on social media talking to absolute strangers, right? But these days, and I'm talking specifically about this particular election cycle that we're in, it seems like the media, the mainstream media, is so partisan. They're like an arm of the Democratic Party. And then many Americans are sick and tired. We just tune them out, and we turn to the internet to find balanced news. And we go to sites like Breitbart and the Gateway Pundit and PJ Media and, the New York Post, Weasel Zippers. There's a lot of sites out there. And they're very, very popular because they also present the conservative side of the narrative. And that's just as important because we need to hear out both sides. Now, many of us, we go into social media. Many Americans, conservative, middle of the road, liberals, they all go to social media and they get a lot of their news from social media and they assume they're getting the full story. But what if the tech giants that control the internet and social media, and I'm talking about companies like Google, which owns YouTube, and about Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, what if they completely control everything that you see? What if they ban certain thinkers? What if they dare delete or fact-check things that the president gets to post online? What if they demonetize conservative news sites to the point that they go bankrupt and have to stop operating? And what if they just plain shadow ban all of us? In other words, when you write stuff online, what if no one gets to see it? You think that something brilliant that you posted is out there for the whole world to see. But in reality, it's blocked. It's shadow banned by an algorithm or by some low-paid left-wing censor. Which leads to the famous question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? Now, I don't really know how much impact big tech will actually have on the election. Many people, especially young ones, think that the world begins and ends with the internet, and then some people say that no, it's not as influential as they think it is. Naturally, we're going to have an answer to this conundrum soon enough. One thing I have no question about is that between mail-in ballots, voter intimidation, ballot harvesting, simple cheating, and a non-stop chorus of hatred against President Trump, many Americans are already completely brainwashed. Their minds are so poisoned against him that it doesn't even matter if he does good. They will categorically never vote for the man. Now add to that the ever-growing influence of big tech, and all of a sudden the whole concept of government of the people, by the people, for the people is under serious assault. Think about it. We're not a government of big tech, by the media, for the globalists. We're supposed to be a republic. We're supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And if this globalist tyranny continues, we will lose all of that. We will lose democracy. We will lose freedom of speech, gun rights, human rights, voting rights. Heck, we're going to lose America. Everything that we believe in, everything that America stands for. Oh man, I'm looking at the clock and I have to take a quick break. Let me calm down, let me collect my thoughts, and we will be right back with our fascinating interview with Breitbart's Allum Bokhari. This is the AJ Steele Show. We shall return.
All I really want to be is the guy that gets the girl.
The AJ Steele Show. Think of your loudmouth best friend, hated by all the wise, because he tells it just like it
You
is.
finally see your love belongs to me.
Hi, Alan. Welcome to the AJ Steele Show.
Hi, AJ. Good to be on.
So I've been following your work on Breitbart for quite a while now, and I've always wondered, what kind of people work for these top-rated conservative sites? Can you tell me a little bit about your background, and how does a young man like you decide to become a conservative writer?
Well, I'm like a lot of people in my teenage years, I was more liberal. But I started noticing in 2013, 2014, this thing that we all grew up with, the internet, was under attack by people who seemed to be threatened by the free speech on it, and all these websites that initially promised free speech, Twitter, Reddit, a number of other sites, they started getting influenced by these people. So there were around 2013, 2014, there were a lot of battles over censorship online. The word social justice warrior was just coming into popular usage, and no one seemed to be covering these battles. And I noticed there was a really big one erupting in video games called Gamergate, and that one lasted for over a year. So when it erupted, I was working in politics at the time. I took the story, sent it to Breitbart, and it became a really huge story for them, and I started working for them that's how I got involved with them, and I started working for them. I got a full-time job there in end of 2015.
Wow, sounds like a dream job to me. What about you? What kind of life? How did you grow up, Allum?
So I grew up in London, went to school in Oxford, always quite interested in politics and history. I always find like history is very useful, and in the book, which we'll discuss shortly, all the all the things we're seeing today and on the internet, the panics about fake news, misinformation, they all have their historical parallels. Whenever there's a new communications medium, there's normally a big social panic about it and its potential effects on society. So I always try and relate present day politics back to history.
Being a conservative isn't easy these days, unless if you live in a bubble somewhere in the West Wing. Has your personal life been affected by your political views? Have you been bullied? Have you been harassed?
Not a lot of that, really. I mean, although one old friend from university completely cut off contact, was sent me a bunch of angry messages after Trump won. He was fine with me being right wing when he thought Trump was going to lose, but as soon as Trump won, it was all over. That's the only example I can think of, but it's certainly something. So I've been fairly fortunate in that regard. But you see all these stories online about people getting disowned by their families and friends because of their political views, getting refused service in restaurants and coffee shops. It's getting pretty bad.
Yeah, it sure is. And unfortunately, that kind of bullying doesn't just end on the streets and in the universities and even on the job. There's a form of institutional high-tech kind of bullying, or lynching for lack of a better word. Now, you have a brand new book coming out very soon called Deleted: Big Tech's Battle to Erase the Trump Movement and Steal the Election. I hear it took you 5 years to research and write this book. Why so long?
Well, it's the product of 5 years. Basically, my work at Breitbart, which has been to sort of follow this trend of tech censorship, which really didn't exist until around 2015. Before then, all the tech platforms took a very laissez-faire attitude towards free speech. But it's been growing ever since then, and I've been looking into it since 2015, been following it since 2015, and got my first, insider sources in 2017, and now I have sources in Facebook, Google, all of these big companies. And all of these sources tell me just how it really accelerated after 2016, after Trump won his election. There was some sense that free speech was eroding before that, especially during that controversy I mentioned, Gamergate. That was the impetus for a lot of early internet censorship efforts. But it just got kicked up into high gear after Trump won. One of my government sources explained it to me as, Western elites saw the internet is very useful for helping them conduct regime changes abroad, which is why they were all very pro-free speech before the Trump movement. But as soon as you get the Trump movement and Brexit and all these other populist movements that are genuinely threatening to the establishment, then suddenly it becomes a threat to the regime here at home. So you got to get rid of free speech. And there's an interesting nexus between the tech companies, the political establishment, political elites, and the media. They all sort of work together to censor their ideological opponents.
Of course. So I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I know a lot of Silicon Valley programmers, and most of them are dyed-in-the-wool liberals, as you probably know. But the ones who are not would never even dare speak their mind in public. They're too scared. Tell me, what kind of meat and potato revelations do you have in your book, and how did you get so many Silicon Valley insiders to become whistleblowers?
Well, Silicon Valley was actually founded on fairly libertarian ideas. I'd say the dominant ideology in the 1990s in Silicon Valley and the sort of growing internet economy was, libertarianism. We're going to have this new technology that's all about free speech, all about decentralization. Everyone can have their website. Everyone can have a voice. Everyone can have access to this global audience, and there's not going to be any gatekeepers or elites moderating your message. And that's the way it was for a very long time. So there are still people who believe that, still people who think like that and work in these companies. And obviously now they've been just completely taken over by far left social justice warriors who are recruited straight out of college campuses. and they want to tell the world what's going on. They see these companies abandoning the ideals they're familiar with. They see them eroding free speech. They see them manipulating information to achieve their political goals, and they feel they have to tell the world. They certainly can't complain about it inside their companies, because as soon as they do, they get harassed and sometimes fired. That's what happened to James Damore when he tried to expose what he called Google's ideological echo chamber.
What was it? Do no harm? Wasn't that their motto at some point?
It was, I believe, don't be evil.
Don't be evil. Sorry, it's the same thing. We're paraphrasing it. So what kind of revelations? I know you can't tell us all of them because you have a lot of them in your book, but tell us some of the stuff, some of the real exciting findings that you have in there.
Well, one of the things I found very interesting is that all of these efforts they have against misinformation, or to protect election integrity, or to deal with the so-called fake news problem, these all arose in response to Trump's victory. They did not exist before 2016 or before the 2016 election. Mm-hmm. And my sources told me that all of the people inside Facebook and Google who are most vocally anti-Trump, they all rushed to join these efforts. So, you see President Trump getting censored today on Twitter, or seeing his ads taken down by Facebook and YouTube. That's not an accident, because the people who the excuse is always misinformation of some kind, whether it's COVID misinformation or something else. And it never ever happens to the opposing side, never happens to Biden, despite crazy conspiracy theories about Vladimir Putin blackmailing Trump or anything like that. They never get banned for conspiracy theories. They never get censored for misinformation. And there's a reason for that, because all the people in charge of these efforts, all the people who pushed for them and joined them when they started up, they were all the most anti-Trump people at these companies.
And of course, they have special protections, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I'm going to ask you a simple question. I'm a simple kind of guy, and so many of my readers, my listeners, people that, tweet to me, they all feel that we're being shadow banned and suppressed. Are we being paranoid about this?
No, I don't think so. And this is the really insidious thing about tech censorship. So, we're all familiar with the bans, high-profile conservatives getting banned from these platforms. You can see that, but the real danger is the things that you can't see, and there's a whole chapter in my book on this. One of my sources explains it very well. That we all have a kind of secret quality score that these tech platforms use to rate our accounts and whether we're valuable to the platform or not. And the point of that quality score initially was to separate, real accounts from, spam bot accounts. A real account is a high quality account that has value to the platform. You can sell ads to the person behind that account. A spam bot account is not very valuable, so it doesn't have a very high quality score. Mm-hmm. And that quality score determines whether you're going to be, whether your posts are going to appear very high in people's news feeds, or whether they're just going to be buried and no one sees them. And we have no way of knowing what our score is. And so when our posts don't go viral, we have to wonder, or don't get seen by anyone, we have to wonder if being covertly suppressed. And while that quality score used to be about objective things like are you spamming or not, are you posting links to unsafe websites or not, websites with malware or whatever, now it's about do you post hate speech, do you post misinformation, do you follow people who post misinformation or hate speech. And these companies, it's very dangerous, because these companies, given what they know about us, can easily build profiles of users based on their political viewpoints. They can identify that conservatives, they use similar reference points, link to similar websites, talk in similar ways about similar issues. And they can build profiles and entire movements and say, okay, we're going to suppress that entire movement. They can turn the volume up or down on entire political movements. And I don't see why they wouldn't use that power, because they have the ability to do it and they have the motive to do it. They have the ideological motive, and there's no law, there's no regulation stopping them.
You're listening to the AJ Steele Show. where no topic is off limits, no discussion too harsh, no truth more true. The AJ Steele Show. We tell it like it is.
All I really want to be is a guy that gets the girl. All I really want to be.
Our interview with Breitbart's Allum Bokhari continues. Now, we both know that money is green, whether it's conservative or liberal. Don't they want our money? Don't they want our, buying power?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, yes and no. I mean, with the covert suppression, they can get people to be on their platforms even while they're censoring them. So that's interesting. But first thing I'd say, the people who run these companies, they're not entirely motivated by money. They have strong political beliefs as well, even stronger as you go further down the food chain to the lower level employees. But they have to, if we're talking in purely self-interested terms about what's in their interests, they also have to consider the fact that if they don't play ball and censor the media's because remember, the mainstream media is one of the forces that push these companies to do more and more censorship. They often drive the censorship. In fact, we published leaks from inside Google in 2018 showing that YouTube adjusted their search results to suppress conservative videos in response to complaints from left-wing journalists. So often journalists drive this. And when Silicon Valley companies don't play ball, when they don't censor enough in the eyes of journalists, they often just whip up huge advertiser boycotts against Facebook, against YouTube. They've done this on multiple occasions. And of course, these companies depend on advertising revenue for their profits. So they're very keen to appease journalists, left-wing journalists specifically, for that reason.
Well, it sounds like the tail wagging the dog to me. Now, you talked about people who are being banned, and there's a whole list of conservatives banned from social media, like Paul Watson, Milo Yiannopoulos, Katie Hopkins. And now they're even banning scientists and doctors, like this young lady, Dr. Li Mengyan, the virologist who exposed China for artificially creating the COVID-19. I could go on and on. But let me ask you about someone else, someone like Laura Loomer. She's a completely different story because she happens to be a Republican candidate for a congressional House seat from Florida. How can they legally ban her without being guilty of election interference?
Well, I think they absolutely are guilty of election interference. The question is, will the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, do anything about it? As I said, there's a sort of nexus between the deep state, the media, and Silicon Valley, and they're all sort of working together in this plot against the populist movement, this plot against the president. So these Silicon Valley companies are absolutely being allowed to get away with election interference. You've got Mark Zuckerberg going around the world saying he doesn't believe in censoring politicians, but he has censored a politician,
Of course
Republican
he has.
candidate in Florida.
Yes.
And he censored President Trump, taking down one of his ads, one of his campaign's ads, rather. So they're absolutely interfering in politics. They're going to interfere in the election. They've said they're going to interfere in the election. We saw leaked footage from Google, one of their executives saying he wants to make the populist movement a blip in history. We saw another Google executive saying, comparing Trump voters to extremists and talking about the technologies they have to deal with extremists. So they're pretty open about what they're going to do.
I guess my follow-up question has to do both with capitalism and with what you're talking about. So the $64,000 question, your book claims that big tech is out to destroy President Trump. But as far as I can see, he's a really good friend to big business and to small business. I mean, the stock market is doing good. Business taxes are extremely low. Why do they hate him so much then?
It's a cultural issue. I mean, yes, these companies want to make money, but they also have an ideology. This whole moment we're living through is basically a moment of elites versus the people. And, the elites run these companies and they have a very clear, distinct ideology. They all believe, for example, recent story, they all believe in critical race theory. Trump is trying to get rid of it. And they see that as a moral crusade. This goes beyond profits for many of them. And they also have to deal with their own employees who are, if anything, even more radical than the people at the top of the companies. They have to deal with the media, increasingly radical, radically anti-Trump, radically left-wing, Marxist even. They all believe in critical race theory again. They all believe in this doctrine of anti-white racism, anti-male sexism. So it's really an ideological struggle that's going on between, I'd say, the corporate sector, the mainstream media, academia versus, the president and the populist movement. And big tech is being drawn into that struggle.
So I want to go back to your words again. You were talking about how some of President Trump's social media posts have been censored and even deleted. Now, this is the President of the United States of America. We're not talking about A.J. Steele here or even an Allum Bokhari. If they can censor the president with impunity, aren't these tech companies already more powerful than the government?
In some ways, they certainly are, and this is what Aaron Swartz warned about. He was a progressive digital activist. I quote him in my book. All the way back in 2011, he was warning that censorship by big tech platforms, which didn't exist back then, it wasn't really happening, is potentially far more dangerous than anything the government can do, because the government is bound by the First Amendment. And with these tech platforms, you have no rights, you have no First Amendment to protect you, nothing to protect your privacy, no constitution. And he predicted this was going to be a problem, and this is far more threatening than any kind of government tyranny we can imagine in the US. In a sense, this is how authoritarians in American society get around the problem of the Bill of Rights, because they can simply outsource all their tyranny to these tech companies. If they want to get someone censored, they ask the tech companies to do it. They want to destroy someone's livelihood, they ask the tech companies to do it. It's a lot more efficient than trying to go through and get the law changed, which you won't really do when you're trying to attack something like free speech.
Oh, absolutely. And recently, President Trump signed an executive order challenging the special status of these social media companies. I understand they're protected by it's called the Communications Decency Act, and specifically Section 230 of that legislation. It gives them broad immunity to curate and moderate their own platforms, right? So President Trump was arguing that big tech is not acting in good faith. Do you feel that his order has had any impact at all?
Well, we have to wait and see, because it has to go through the bureaucracy now. The Commerce Department has petitioned the FCC to issue a statement narrowing the rules of Section 230, narrowing the interpretation. Mm-hmm. And we have to see if the FCC is going to do that. They're currently in the process of nominating a new commissioner, so you have to wait for that as well. Frankly, I don't think we'll see the results of that executive order until after the election. So it's a very good executive order. Section 230 certainly does need to be reformed. Specifically, the part of Section 230, as you said, that gives them broad immunity to censor and take down content. There's another part of Section 230 which is often attacked by the entertainment lobby, which protects tech companies from being sued for defamation, for things posted by their users. And that's a part of Section 230 that most people agree is positive, because it allows these tech platforms to exist, be a platform for everyone without necessarily moderating everyone's speech. But the second part, the one that gives them broad immunity to take down content, has never really been necessary. Because you have to remember, and I always make this point, there's absolutely no reason why these tech companies should censor any First Amendment protected speech. If you look at the era before Trump, before this rise in tech censorship, Google has always had a button in the top right corner called Safe Search. And what Safe Search does is, it filters out any obscene results from your search engine, which many people don't want to see. But that's up to the user. The consumer gets to decide whether to turn that button on or off. And all of these new filters they've made for fake news, for misinformation, for hate speech, those are being imposed on consumers. They don't get a choice. They can't choose to turn the filters on or off. But we know they have the technology to do that because they've done it before. So the reason they're not doing it is because they've chosen not to do it. They don't want to give up that control to their consumers, to their users. So that's what we should be aiming towards. That's why we should, I think, get rid of that legal immunity for taking down content altogether and if anything, replace it with a provision saying, well, you can add filters, but they have to be optional. Like the user gets to decide. You've got to maximize consumer choice.
AJ Steele, not right, not left, just right.
Our interview with Allum Bokhari continues. Let me ask you a question, and another interesting question. I know that people like you and is Project Veritas, you guys release a lot of information showing bias in the high tech and in the media, and yet they keep humming right along. They seem to continue doing what they're doing with impunity, zero consequences. Do you feel that Americans are just not educated enough, or are we just too apathetic to care at this point? Have we just given up our liberties without a fight?
Well, in a normal functioning democracy, it's with the job of politicians and regulators to protect American consumers from these tech companies, from their power, to rein in their power, to add more consumer protections. The problem is both Republicans and Democrats have been bought and paid for by these tech companies. Mm-hmm. They fund both sides of the aisle. They fund conservative think tanks to defend them from regulation. They fund progressive think tanks as well. You have one political party, the Democrats. Their politicians want more censorship, not less. They want to further undermine the rights of consumers on these platforms. They don't want to add any sort of due process for people who've been unfairly suspended, because they know that censorship helps them. So unfortunately, this is something where politicians and regulators who are supposed to protect the American public have sort of given up their role. You've got at least half of them now getting into bed with the tech companies to censor their ideological opposition. So this is really an area where the grassroots will have to make their voice heard. They've got to make sure that their representatives don't take money from these companies. Far too many politicians take money from Google and Facebook. I always say conservative voters should consider taking money from big tech to be as unacceptable as taking money from Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a grassroots consumer backlash against these companies, I think, for anything to change, or at least for politicians to, other than President Trump, to start taking action on the subject. And it really goes beyond politics, because this is something that even a Democrat who owns a business will be concerned about. So many businesses today are dependent on having a Facebook page, having a presence on Google search, being high up in the search results. Some businesses depend on their YouTube channel, some depend on their Instagram page, and they have no legal rights on these platforms whatsoever. If you get evicted from a physical property, you have legal rights. You can take your landlord to court, say, he evicted me for arbitrary reasons. But if you have, say, $1 million Facebook page, you have no legal recourse. If that gets taken down, they can do it for any reason or no reason. That's what they've successfully argued in court. And that's not good for any consumer. It's not good for any business, regardless of what your politics are.
Well, to be fair, they are private businesses. The only issue is they are abusing that Section 230 that we talked about. I only have a last few questions for you. It's been a fascinating interview, Allum. Thank you for coming on. First question is this: who do you think is controlling everything? Do you think the tech companies are controlling the world? Do you think there's a big globalist cabal, or do you think it's the politicians? It's just a general question for you.
Well, I think it's a mix of all three. We have these various centers of power in society, and I think that the power of politicians is sort of illusory in to a large degree. Most of the political government power, I think, today rests with the deep state, the administrative state. Democracy is sort of like a smokescreen for this vast bureaucracy we have that controls everything. But the big tech companies control a great deal as well. Their power is growing. I always one of the useful ways I think you can track power in society over history is you look at who's being lobbied. So before the Democratic era, you'd have courtiers in the at the palaces of kings trying to lobby the king and the leading nobles to get what they want. Then in the democratic era, you have professional lobbyists who lobby the politicians. But now we're seeing people lobbying the tech companies to get what they want. And that tells you something about where power lies in society, that you see all these media companies and even politicians asking the tech companies to help them achieve their policy aims, whether that's censoring so-called hate speech or anything else, or helping out with COVID or any of these things. So we're now seeing people lobbying the corporate sector to get what they want, and that shows how power is shifting. But, politicians still have power, bureaucrats still have power, the mainstream media certainly has power. They use their power against tech companies with the ad boycotts I mentioned. So we have all these competing power centers in society as well. But I certainly think the power of tech companies is vast and growing, and they essentially control all meaningful free speech in America today. Almost all significant political discourse happens online in the present, and that's happening in a space that's not protected by the First Amendment, and I think that needs to change.
I agree with you 100%. I think we're headed to a modern kind of feudalism, really. I have a question to which you don't have an answer, but I want to ask you anyway. Who do you think is going to win the presidency?
Right now, it's very difficult to say. I think the debates are going to be more critical than in any previous election because the race is so tight at the moment. But certainly, this is the first election where we're going to see the power of big tech deployed in its entirety, because we didn't see that in 2016 because the tech companies, like the rest of elite society, were convinced Hillary Clinton was going to win. They were completely blindsided by the election. They're not going to be complacent this time around. We already see Google changing its search results, suppressing conservative websites in search results. And the real danger is going to be undecided voters. Because if you're an undecided voter and you want to find out more about Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you're going to go on the internet. You're going to use Google search. And what are you going to find there? You're going to be met with a stream of propaganda from the mainstream media. It's very unlikely that these tech companies will let undecided voters ever see conservative information that might push them towards voting for Donald Trump. And keep in mind, they know who all the undecided voters are because they know so much about us and our interests and our preferences. So that's going to be a huge factor in this election season. That's why my book is called, Big Tech's Battle to Erase the Trump Movement and Steal the Election. That has been the unspoken goal of Silicon Valley for the past 4 years.
And, I had a chance to review your book. It's a real fascinating read, and I think it's really going to resonate with the American public and actually all over the world. It's a very important book. Where can people buy it?
So if you go to deletedbook.com, there are various options to buy it there. You can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it at Barnes & Noble, and there are a bunch of other retailers you can buy it from as well.
Hopefully it doesn't get banned, right?
Hopefully not. I guess we'll see. You never can tell these days.
No, you can't. Allum Bokhari, I want to thank you for coming on the AJ Steele Show. I hope you continue your important work on your own and with Breitbart. I absolutely think that brave people just like you are the last line of defense between us and complete mind control and censorship by big tech. I wish you the best of luck with your book, and I hope we can have you again with us on the AJ Steele Show.
Thanks, AJ. Great to be on, and thanks for the invite.
All I really want to be is a guy that gets a girl. All I really want to be. All I really want to be is a guy that gets a girl.
The AJ Steele Show, copyrighted 2020.